Welcome to God with George Ortega. This is episode number 66. I'm recording it on Monday, January 25th, 2021 at 8:01 p.m. Eastern Time. And I was just attending a class by a rabbi, and the topic came up of nothing being extraneous in the Bible. And this is kind of related to God. I'm going to try to relate it to God. The idea is like, so every single word in the Torah, at least the Old Testament, um, has significance, has meaning. It's not a mistake. There's a problem with that, and this actually addresses a kind of like a problem of prophetic understanding of God. In other words, if we rely just on Torah, on Scripture, to understand God, the problem is that according to our understanding of human beings, we're not perfect. We make mistakes. We make mistakes all the time. Now, to claim that none of the authors of the Old Testament of the Torah, even the New Testament, um, made mistakes is it's a blasphemous idea, because the only being in reality who can't make a mistake is God. Because if God is everything, God created everything, God is everything, God controls everything. If you have those, and God knows everything, so if you have those four attributes, it's impossible to make a mistake. So anyway, so like, yes, this is important because, like, actually tomorrow night, I'm gonna tape an episode with my friend Andy. We've been friends for almost 40 years. He happens to be a Messianic Jewish rabbi, and he believes some stuff like that. The world is 6,000 years old, and all this stuff that doesn't seem. He's a literalist. He's what they say in the Bible actually happened. Like a staff turned into snakes and stuff, and so that can become problematic. And in other words, like, if we don't question and evolve from our ancestors' view of reality, view of God, view of who we are in relation to God, then we're stuck in the past. I mean, we need to basically, and what's interesting is, like, the fundamental tool that God gave us to understand everything, including every statement, every word of Torah, every word of the Bible, is logic and reason. In other words, like, people somehow logically deduced that it was logical, rational to conclude that the Bible is infallible. You know, I mean, I think it's a mistaken conclusion, but nonetheless, logic is the tool that took them there. So, all right, so that's what God had me start this episode with. Now we got to see what I want to talk about, because I was intending to do the episode with my friend Andy today, but then I forgot about this Torah class that I wanted to attend, so I did that. And let's see. Um, oh, all right. This is interesting. So, like, this is an example of God manifesting God's will, God's being in various ways at various times. For example, there are some times when I come here and do an episode, and my mind is working in such a way, God is imparting thoughts to me in such a way that I will flow from theme to theme to theme, kind of like seamlessly, just like, it's effortless. It feels effortless. Whereas, like, other times, like tonight, I think, God, for whatever reason, wants me to reach. So let's try to think, and give me a little, this is a 28-minute show. Give me like a few seconds to try to figure out something about God that we haven't touched on yet. Um, Oh, yeah, no, no. All right. So like I was thinking about this before because a lot of times I'll think about something, earlier in the day and hopefully I remember it for this. So like the idea is like, and this to me sometimes this is a terrifying thought. And I have to like choose to believe something without really any evidence, but like the alternative would be too horrible. And that's this idea of like, like think about like God being eternal. God existed before God created the world. Um, I'm not sure where I'd like to, yeah, I need to kind of like try to find first instances of these beliefs we believe in, that God is eternal, that God is infinite, because back in the Abrahamic times, they didn't have all these beliefs. These have, evolved. So, but like this idea that God is eternal, um, well, all right. Sometimes when I think about it in the traditional biblical sense, which I think is mistaken, is like, oh my goodness. I mean, like, there was no world, there was just God. Maybe God hadn't even created angels, whatever. And God is just like alone. God's just eternally, and that's got to like, I mean, if I were God, like, again, like the way I, make sense of this in a way that removes this terror from it is that, well, God, God isn't like me. In other words, like, yes, if I was a human being and I was eternal, that might be really scary. But God is God, and that means that God is all powerful. So, like, God, I'm guessing, you know, this eternity that God has existed in and God always exists in, um, is probably a blissful eternity. Because think about it, if you're God, you control everything. Why wouldn't you like, keep yourself in complete bliss? Um, and that would be fortunate because again, like, it's bad enough that we human beings and other life forms suffer pain, but it would be far worse. And yeah, like in the Bible all over the place, you read that when we suffer, God suffers. In a certain sense, it's right, it's accurate because we are God. God is manifesting God's suffering through us. God's imparting suffering thoughts, suffering feelings, to us. And so they have to be God's. But in this sense, I kind of like separate, God as a totality or the conscious will from God as the expression of that will, everything else, the worlds, including us. Um, and another kind of thought that came to mind to kind of like help me to come to terms with this idea of God being eternal is that, well, again, in the Bible, it doesn't talk about any other worlds. But, if we, again, we rely on logic, if God is infinite and eternal, and, and, and coupling that with what we know of the universe, 2.2 to 3 trillion galaxies, each with 2 to 300 billion stars, you've got to, the most plausible, reasonable understanding of Earth existence, pre-universe existence for God was that there's an infinite number of other big bangs and universes that God created before us. And within those infinite number of universes, there are infinite number of worlds. So, like, so this idea that God could be like lonely, alone in this world, I imagine that's why, that's how, I suppose, I don't, I mean, God didn't have to do this, but God, creates worlds. There's got to be an infinite number of worlds, which is mind-boggling. It'd be great if religion evolved to the point where we're exploring that, not, understanding it near completely, not at all, but just like, positing, this as a logical deduction of God being eternal and God being infinite, so, all right. So there's another thought that came to my mind about the Bible, and I don't know, God just like, God gave me a thought and then just like it's gone. So so now we're back, and this is, I shouldn't complain because this, if this was easy, I wouldn't be doing it. I like to kind of like, you know, do things that'll challenge me somewhat. I'm getting better at bass guitar. I'm really, getting good. Um, but then, like, like then, I'll play like, and I'm playing really well one night, right? Then the next day, I wake up early in the morning, start playing, and it sucks again. And I'm going, what's going on here? So I don't know. I'm hoping, like, again, it's been 16 months I've been playing. I'm hoping that that in a year or so I'll be good, and consistently. But what was that? I had a thought about like, all right, so well, I don't know if that thought will come again, but there's more to explore in terms of understanding God. Oh yes, now I got it. All right, so like, and this, this is how like sometimes our logic is illogical, and it's like infinity, the concept of infinity. Like, how could the universe just like, first of all, how could it expand, or inflate from a tiny little Big Bang to what it is? It must have inflated into something, right? And wouldn't you think that something would have to be part of reality? You know, uh, Physics doesn't answer that question. I think some people think that physics answers it in the sense that it expanded into nothing, but no. A more accurate understanding of what physics says is like this Big Bang inflated, and it can't perceive what it inflated into. It's not, there's like this barrier, let's say before the Big Bang, and relative to various things. So so in the class earlier tonight, you know, um, there's a passage, um, I guess in Exodus, where God is like, doing something like God does something with his right hand and does something else with his right hand. It doesn't seem to be it doesn't seem to make sense. How could God have two right hands? And then it occurred to me, and I wanted to ask the rabbi, but the class ended. It's like, wait a minute, God is infinite. An infinite God can plausibly and reasonably have an infinite number of right hands. It makes sense. Um, and again, getting back to reason, this is important. Reason is how we understand everything. We get an intuition. Let's say it's not quote unquote reasonable. We either accept it or we don't. And and I would think at a certain point, there may be an intuition to accept it, but to accept the intuition, at a certain point, there has to be a logical deduction made that, oh, it makes sense, if I had this experience, I had this knowledge, there's a logical kind of a reason why it's true or why I believe it's true, whatever. Um, but I'm mentioning this relative to our understanding of God, to our exploring God, and hopefully, cultivating much better understanding as we evolve as a human species, because um, we're at a stage where we want to expand our understanding of God. We want to be closer to God. We want to have a deeper understanding of God, a more accurate understanding, you know. And and the problem with our major religions, they do a world of good. They really form the communities of the world. Unless somebody belongs to a country club or some kind of like association or whatever. I mean, no, religious congregations are the communities of at least the modern world. Unless you live in a small town, well, that's a genuine community. But but um, but yeah, our religious institutions, as you've noticed, they resist change. And like they not only resist change. I mean, like they'll kill you if you question their beliefs, their sacred beliefs and stuff. Well, I mean, like Yeah, no, unfortunately, it's not even funny, but like, we're not past that yet. I mean, here in the United States, for the most part, we are, but that's kind of like, we need to evolve beyond that. We need to, to, well, I guess what I'm trying to say is we've got the prophetic tradition, and then we have, let's say, the rabbinic tradition or the logical tradition. The rabbis, the people who tried to interpret what the prophets had said, what Moses has said, the other prophets, they didn't rely on God telling them, well, this is so, and that's why they believe it, and they're going to tell everybody that. They used reason. Um, and and so we've got to, we have to, I think, accelerate that process. Um, well, I mean, like let's tie this understanding of God and who we are and all to what our world is like today. Let's consider the pandemic. Um, my understanding is that God, reality, rewards us when we do good, punishes us when we don't, both individually and collectively. And and so this pandemic is, in my mind, almost certainly the result of abusing, torturing up to about 80 billion farm animals every year. I mean, that's the most horrific sin, I think in the history of humankind. And see, the problem is then you have a lot of religions. You don't hear, Judaism, Christianity, you don't hear anybody talking about this. They say that, well, oh no, God allows us to eat animals. It's right in the Bible, we have these kosher laws. But what they fail to acknowledge is that yes, we're allowed to eat them. And actually, before the flood, biblically, everybody was vegan. Nobody ate animals. It was like God was saying, "Oh, you guys like descended so much. Now we're going to allow you to eat animals because, like, you're so corrupt." But but what I'm trying to say is like our, and this is more perhaps a criticism, yeah, our conventional religion, the institutions. Um, they're afraid to make changes, perhaps because they're afraid to offend their congregants, perhaps their older congregants who finance their their activities, whatever. I don't know, but there's fear of change in religion, and before the Industrial Revolution, before the Scientific Revolution, before this century, I suppose it was relatively safe to have that attitude, to have that very conservative, very, you have to, tradition is sacrosanct. You really have to have a really, really good reason to, to, um, to change, to change what you do, how you think. But, and so like a lot of religions don't even, I've heard clerics say, no, this COVID is not punishment from God. Because like if that's a liberal, interpretation, I guess. Because like the conservatives a while back were saying, well, HIV/AIDS was the punishment for being gay, which there's reason behind that. Uh, Gays tend to be very promiscuous. They like sex a lot, whatever. So and have a lot of partners, whatever. So there's a resistance among liberals to and conservatives, really, because I think most conservatives um, would reject the notion that this pandemic is from God. And it's hard to say because you don't hear them talking about it. I've Googled this. They don't really. And so, like, what I'm trying to say is we need to we need to arrive at a more accurate understanding of us in relation to God, of what God does and doesn't do, if we're going to survive. I mean, the way things are going, um, you're familiar with the decline of the Roman Empire. the decline of the British Empire. I mean, empires come, empires go, and the way things are going, this empire of humanity, of modern civilization, is headed on a downward spiral. Not just because like these, pandemics are going to be more prevalent unless we change our ways, but with climate change, the people are unwilling, unable to understand that human beings, can wield so much power as to change the climate of the planet. But this is where logic takes us. This is what logic tells us. So yeah, so I guess what God is having me, like, see, when I first started this, I didn't know what God was, which is kind of like fun, like, all right, what's God going to let me, have me say tonight, whatever, today. Um, but um, but yeah, we're at a time where if we don't evolve really quickly in terms of our religious beliefs, question, something's, written in the Bible, question it against science, question it against logic. A staff turning into a snake, you gotta like question that. It's like, you gotta understand history also. Like these Eastern religions. It's well known that within Eastern religions, they're storytellers that would exaggerate a lot. Not just Judaism, but Hinduism. Perhaps Buddhism also. And yeah, we need to make this transition from religion that's based on prophecy, meaning that some guy a long time ago said something, and so we need to believe it, and it's heretical not to believe it, because the guy said so. The guys, some guy said, all right, this is the truth, and if you don't believe it, like let's all kill that person, whatever. I don't know. And like, they actually said stuff like that, and then then they got away with making these kinds of pronouncements to keep what they said, vibrant or alive in generation to generation. But I hope you can understand that in today's world, we can't afford that that unthinking, irrational, um, belief in actually in people being infallible. I mean, it's irrational. We were talking before about extraneous passages in the Torah that that there has to be some, because like if there weren't, that would mean that the people who wrote them didn't make any mistakes, and that would mean they were infallible, and that would mean that they were like God, and that's blasphemous. Again, we humans make mistakes all the time, and so all right, what else? I wanted first. I got about a little under 5 minutes. Politics. Why do I want to like my, no, I better not go there. Well, yes, I mean, like, we just came through this Trump era where Trump was Satan, he was like the devil, to many of us, at least in the northern states. And now we find that the Democrats are like fast tracking impeachment because it's not politically expedient to have it go on for months, to wait for this evidence to be so overwhelming that the Republicans couldn't possibly refuse it. And well, that, I'm trying to like tie this with logic. Well, I mean, like the question we could ask is, why does God do that? And then this is like, this is an extension of the basic question. Why does God, again, God is all powerful. We're always ever manifesting God's will. Why does God make us mess up, so much that we're messing up, you know, we really are on a downward spiral in civilization. If we don't change fast, within 100 years, we'll probably lose a couple of billion people at least. And I mean, like knowing human nature, I wouldn't be surprised if if they resorted to nuclear wars or cyber attacks or just It's like, yeah, we maybe, yeah, I think what God is trying to tell me, and me, you, is that I don't think we can rely on politics. There was that song by Sting, I think, or "There is no political solution." And this is one reason. This is actually why I'm doing the show. I did 61 episodes on how to create future pandemics. I sent, you know, material to hundreds of media outlets. The major ones, the minor ones, college ones, international ones, and you rarely read about this. Basically, people don't care. People don't care whether we have another pandemic or not. People don't care that the next pandemic might be 10 times worse, might, you know, bring this whole economic system, tumbling down in a way that stimulus packages can't fix. So again, the question becomes, why does God do that? Um, and the answer is that, it could be we've been relying on science, we've been relying on politics, on society, and ourselves. When I think God is telling us, and like telling me by doing the show. And again, the reason I did the series is I gave up on the Democrats. I gave up on politics. I gave up on humanity. We're just like really corrupt. Just the fact that we're abusing, torturing 80 billion animals each year, and and nobody, people like, huh? No, we can't do it. Like, oh, they don't feel pain. They're not like us. I mean, it's like bizarrely, insanely stupid, really. That's what it is. I mean, like, but it's a combination of stupidity and I guess self-interest. Just we don't want to pay more for our meat, or we don't want to all go vegan. But anyway, yeah, I think God is kind of like pushing us. God will do this. God will push us in our personal lives. Like if we're an alcoholic, God will make us really, really sick. So we have to, like, jump on the wagon or off the wagon, whatever it is, stop drinking. So God's doing this now with the world, and which is a good thing. And I think I'm a part of it. I'm trying to like spread this message of like, listen to God, because you're not smart enough to. No. All right. So I've got like half a minute left. Thanks for watching. Catch this every Monday through Friday on White Plains Community Media Channel 76. If you get Optimum 45, you get Verizon. I've been good at uploading all the episodes to YouTube recently. So catch them there. And God willing, tomorrow Andy and I were going to like go through the proofs of God, but I thought it'd just be much more interesting, much more fun if we just had a conversation about God and didn't prepare and see what happened. All right. Thanks for watching.